can also participate at each other's conference. It's really a challenge to talk about this topic for me now from different perspectives. First of all, addressing a topic which is about capitals, markets, capitalism, ultimately after discussing the Rwandan genocide is, well, really a challenge. It's a different layer of the problems. Yet at the same time, it shows you that natural law issues may affect almost every aspect of human life, including the very existence and or economic freedoms. I also wanted to thank personally to Juan Carlos for involving me into this event. As you can see, my topic is about competition rules, natural law. I will also talk about quite a lot about Catholic social teaching. That is, talking about issues like that is always a challenge for me, I must say. That is because you can be a quite good competition lawyer, practicing lawyer, or even an academic of competition law without ever mentioning these phrases of natural law or Catholic social teaching. Yet, personally, for me, these things are very important. I was just thinking about there might be two reasons why competition policy law issues and natural law can be distinguished in a way that you can put a kind of wall in between those two, and you can talk about competition rules without ever mentioning natural law. And these two reasons are like this: that first of all, many business regulations have really no connection with natural law principles because they are so technical, so administrative, that they are, they don't reach the depth of what natural law is about. The second reason is, which is almost as important, that in many cases, natural law principles did indeed influence, did shape our laws. And that means that many of our business regulations, many of our competition rules are in fact following natural law principles. And with that indirectly talking about some competition law principles, you can talk about natural law at the same time. Is it okay if I use my slides this way so that I just can't push the start slideshow button because I have the Zoom buttons at the same place on my screen?
It's quite all right.
Thank you very much. So anyway, these are my slides. To save some time, as you see, I have 16 slides. I will just talk about the half of these. I will make a huge jump in the middle. I hope that if you are interested in this topic, you can do some more reading after the conference into my slides. So to start with, I assume that most of the audience is not really a competition law expert. So I just thought to start with a short introduction of what is competition about, mainly in the sense of how we in the Western world understand competition and rivalry. So that's a nice definition. I think I have stolen it from an OECD document. It's a quite, I would say, natural law kind of definition in the sense that it's ultimately universally applicable. So it's a situation in which firms independently strive for buyers' patronage in order to achieve a particular business objective, which can be profits, sales, market shares, and maybe many others. That's a point where natural law or Catholic social teaching may come in, and based on these theories, we could add other objectives like serving the common good, for example. Rivalry, the coexistence of individual rivalry and cooperation, that is a huge topic for competition lawyers, which is pretty much determined by cultural backgrounds. You can imagine that Asian people or African people, you know, with this Ubuntu heritage, you have a quite different approach to cooperation versus rivalry compared to the mainly Protestant, ethic-driven Western European countries. So it's a very fascinating topic. Maybe we have time to discuss this during the question time. The goals of competition law can be manifold. They may differ from country to country. The mainstream approach is that competition law is there to increase consumer welfare. In some countries, it's social welfare. It's also about protecting the economic freedom of individuals. And also in some countries, in some regions, like not only in the European Union, but also in your region in East Africa, competition rules also help to deepen, to further market integration of various national economies. Here you can just see the three layers of what we here in Europe mean under competition rules. The universal so-called hardcore part of competition law is what we call antitrust. That covers basically three big topics. First, anti-competitive agreements are prohibited, just like cartels among competitors. Second, we have a prohibition on abuse of dominance. And third, we have rules on the control of mergers and acquisitions, huge concentrations between companies. I'm pretty sure you also have these rules there in place in Kenya and also in many developed African countries. The second layer, the blue one, as you can see it, is very European specific. In most countries, we do not have such competition rules, but here in the EU, we do have. So like we have strict rules on how governments may spend public money. We have a competition policy driven control of state. We also have other rules on exclusive rights, legal monopolies, how the state can intervene into the markets, very exciting topics. And third, in some countries, like in my country, in Hungary, also unfair commercial practices, most importantly, misleading advertising rules, they are also included into this huge topic of competition rules. So if you are doing business, then of course you have to obey the rules of the countries. And of those rules, competition rules are always there. They are very important for business people to know them. I just summarized these rules on the previous slide. In addition to legal rules, we also have, of course, moral rules. And it's very important to recognize, to understand and accept that undertakings, companies are also bound by moral rules. It's not disputed nowadays anymore in Western Europe, in the US. In fact, if you look at the websites of big corporations, big companies, or if you look at the rules of professional associations, like engineers, lawyers, hairdressers, every associations have so-called moral rules, ethical codes. That's how they call it. And in addition to legal rules, these companies also do follow these ethical rules. And if you infringe these ethical rules, there will be consequences, just like when you infringe legal rules. You can also see the third circle trying to involve into the discussion the natural law, Catholic social teaching aspect as well. I believe that these rules, these principles mainly influence moral rules. There is maybe a greater overlap there on the screen, but to some extent, natural law and the principles of Catholic social teaching also influence legal rules. Catholic social teaching is, I'm not I'm not sure how familiar you are with this concept. Modern Catholic social teaching started in the late 19th century with the publication of a very famous encyclical called Rerum Novarum. That came as a kind of response to the socialist, to the communist movement spreading around Europe and in the US at that time. Ever since that time, almost every pope found it very important to issue such so-called encyclical letters, which are very long letters, kind of booklets, addressing social and economic problems of those current days. And in these encyclical letters, the popes, in the light of the Bible and in the light of Catholic tradition, they try to give advices, principles, a kind of help to politicians, to businessmen, to every person, in fact, how to make our life better, how to become a better human person. It's very important to emphasize that although the huge title of these encyclical letters of this topic starts with the word Catholic, yet these documents are addressing not only the members of the Catholic Church. To the contrary, every pope emphasizes that the audience they want to reach is every human being on earth, including religious, non-religious person, so on and so forth. This is maybe a point where you can see why and how Catholic social teaching very often relies on natural law principles. Natural law is obviously an older concept stemming from ancient Greek and Roman times. Yet, ever since Christianity took over the public sphere in Europe, the relationship between natural law, the way it developed in Europe, and Catholic social teaching is very, very strong. Very, very difficult to make a distinction since then. There are many principles in Catholic social teaching which may have an impact on the organization of markets, on competition. Here I just listed a few. I would like to save some time here and maybe just emphasize that, of course, human dignity, as understood in the Christian world, derives from the fact that we believe that we humans were made as the image of God, and raises a quite high burden, as you can imagine, a quite high level of approach here. So maybe that's the most important principle. Other principles like solidarity, subsidiarity derive from. In our Christian human dignity approach, we emphasize that economic freedom, including free competition, rivalry, is only one element of human freedom, but it's very important. It must be protected. On the other hand, we don't really love consumerism as it is nowadays in many Western European so-called developed countries, which meaning that people, they just care about money, food, things, luxury things they can consume, and that makes you valuable. If you don't have money, then you are not valuable. That is not true according to our approach to human dignity. And these are factors, which may bring about a somewhat different approach to regulation, how we see markets, competition, and rivalry. In the next slides, I summarize a few thoughts from various popes from various times. So I just want to skip this. Maybe just emphasizing the common thread here, that over the centuries, the Catholic Church had a quite cautious approach to free competition and capitalism. At the core of that cautious approach is that they acknowledge that competition, rivalry, as belonging to the human freedom thing is very important. It's essential. We must have it. Yet at the same time, because we are fallen creatures, we are sinful people, this regulation, this freedom must be curbed, must be regulated. we must set up boundaries. In contrast to the very liberal economies we had before the 19th century, the 20th century so-called social market economy principle, it's basically about this, that we are regulating markets. We don't believe that free markets can solve every problem of the human society. Yet we don't say that competition would not be important. We do need rivalry at the heart of our economic and social system. In the next slides, I tried to come up with some more concrete ideas about how we can reconcile natural law and competition rules. When I thought about this topic, I thought that this is how we could approach the issue. First of all, asking the question that, are there competition rules, business rules out there which conflict with natural law? If that was the case, then it would cause a serious problem. Then you could think about whether is this law at all, positive law which is against natural law. Well, according to natural law principles, that's maybe not law at all. The good news is that as a rule, competition rules do not conflict with natural rules. I just came up maybe one tiny bit of example where it may not be the case. One important natural law principle is every human person's and every nation's right to self-defense, right? So if you are attacked, it's a very topical issue today. If you are under war, if you are attacked, then you have the natural right to protect yourself. And it's not because the criminal law allows you to do that, but it comes from our nature. It's a natural law. How we could transfer this principle into economics, into competition? In some countries, in some times, we had an exception from the cartel prohibition. Cartel prohibition, we have a prohibition on cartels. We also have a prohibition on abuse of dominance. And you could imagine a situation where there is a bad guy in the market, a dominant company, trying to put undue pressure on the surviving competitors and trying to abuse its position, exclude them from the market, kill them all, attacking them. Well, you may wonder whether in such situation, if the small competitors were trying to collaborate, forming a joint, cooperative, a kind of cartel against the big giant, the dominant company, whether it should be justifiable. According to current mainstream rules, such a cooperation between small competitors fighting against a dominant company would still be a cartel, and it still would be unlawful. So maybe that's a point where you can imagine some conflict between these two legal areas. Second point, in most cases, competition rules are just neutral to natural law. There is no overlap between these two, I would say. We have very many technical rules in competition rules, for example, regulating the way how a producer may distribute its product. Or we have many technical rules on merger control, on how you have to notify your concentration. These are not big issues, not big deals. They are not covered by natural law. And finally, you can come up with ideas where competition rules, but you could say that competition rules are maybe inspired or at least supported by natural law. And here I have a few examples for that. Very many business regulations, more generally, many laws, many positive laws are rooted into the 10 Commandments in our Christian Jewish tradition, at least in the second part of those commandments, regulating the relation between humans. Even if you are not a religious person believing in God, I think you would respect the second part of those commandments. We could also talk about the golden rule, of do nothing to others you would not have done to you. You can find this principle not only in the Bible, but also in many other Eastern, and I'm sure also African religions and philosophies. So it's a kind of natural law, you could say. So if we accept this, then you could say, for example, that or prohibition on cartels, harming consumers, artificially raising prices, excluding smaller companies from the markets, is a kind of steal. It's a kind of fraud. Many, if you look at, for example, the website of the American Department of Justice, fighting against cartels as kind of crimes, they would very often quote the Bible, saying that we fight against cartels because cartel members are thieves. They are stealing money from the poor consumers in the form of higher prices. So there's a very strong moral background behind cartel prohibition, I would say. Also, if you look at misleading advertising rules, prohibiting undertakings not to lie through advertisements to their consumers, well, it's against, obviously, the prohibition of no false testimony. And finally, you could make an analogy between or abuse of dominance rules, where we try to protect small companies and consumers against the bad wills of dominant giant companies. This may come close, maybe indirectly, to the do not kill prohibition. Of course, we are not talking about human lives here directly, but about the position of a company in a market. A dominant company can exclude its competitors from the market by unfair methods. And that is, I believe, also a morally wrong activity. I could also say that natural law and even more Catholic social teaching would also put an extra burden to companies. So I believe that by now we have very many companies who are organized according to these Catholic Christian principles of virtuous rivalry, where they are prepared to walk the extra mile, and in addition to increasing or searching for profits, which is natural, they also try to accomplish other public goals through their existence. So that's a very important topic, which again we would merit a different presentation. A very difficult, interesting topic for us is if we accept that, love your neighbor as yourself is the guiding principle, not only for Christians, but for every person, hopefully, in the world, how you can put this principle into economic rivalry. From the at first sight, it's easy if you look at the relations within a company and the relations between a company and its suppliers, consumers. There you can say that this is the best business approach, that you should love those persons with whom you are working together, right? It will yield good business results. However, if you look at the relation with your competitors, how to, soft drink manufacturers should behave in the market, then it's a dangerous concept, because that would be basically a cartel. So the bottom line is that competitors should never love each other as much as, for example, a husband and a wife should love each other, but rather they should compete with each other in a virtuous way, not trying to kill each other, not wishing the death of the other competitor, but wishing that through this competitive process, each and everyone can become a bit better, can become more efficient, cheaper, and produce better products to the consumers. So finally, here's a few summarizing thoughts. I pretty much hope that morality and economic competition can indeed be reconciled. We can see more and more good examples for that nowadays. Economic and moral orders are not distinct from each other. It's just unacceptable, humanly impossible to have two faces and, you know, be a great family man when you go back home and following the rules, going to the church, giving money to the poor, but when you go to the business, then you become, you know, an animal, a wolf, killing everyone. You just cannot have that. You have always just one soul in both situations. And the bottom line is that if you are interested in these topics, so how you behave in the market in a more ethical way, maybe in line with Catholic social teaching, then the church really offers a quite good reading for you. So we have these great encyclicals addressing all the people in the world with goodwill, and I'm pretty sure that we can learn a lot from these documents. Thank you for your patience, for your time. I'm here with you, so if you want to discuss any of these topics, I'm happy to contribute to the conference.
Thank you very much for the thought-provoking presentation. In the interest of time, if anyone